Before we get to today's Cowboys Report, we are losing the like battle this month against the Raiders. They've made a nice little ride the past couple days. We are running out of time to catch them and beat them. So like today's video. Of course, make sure you're liking every video here on the Cowboys Report. Today's show is led by the drama between Malik Hooker, Micah Parsons, all based on podcasts, right? Malik Hooker recently went on Keyshawn Johnson's All Facts, No Breaks podcast, and he made several comments that made some national headlines. And Micah Parsons, I think understandably, took issue with some of them. So first, this is what Malik Hooker said on Micah, the podcast. Then we'll get to the other stuff, the contracts and more later. My advice for Micah would be just know we're all right and being where your feet are. Because if we're at work and the run game's terrible, but you're doing a podcast every week and you know the run game is terrible, then what are you really caring about? Are you caring about the crowd that's watching your podcast, or are you caring about the success of your team and the Super Bowl that we're trying to reach? Now, I think Micah mostly disliked that comment. This part here from Malik Hooker, I think, is a little bit more understandable from Micah's perspective. But also, people got to remember Micah's young, Hooker said. He's still trying to find his way. He's still trying to grow into who he's trying to be. So I give him grace. You know, Mike is still a big kid, and you can't fault a big kid for trying to expand, as well as experiencing stuff that they ain't really been through. Micah's only been in the league 4 years. Side note, he's entering his 4th year, but still. There's still experiences, stuff he ain't been through. He ain't never been through real adversity yet. He hasn't seen that. So I feel like over time, over these next couple of years of experiencing adversity, you'll see him start to change how he approaches stuff like that, like the podcast and stuff like that. We'll get to more comments from Malik Hooker, Micah's response, and then Malik's response to the response itself. But what is your one-word reaction to, I'm just going to call it the podcast drama because I don't really know how else to describe it there. It is today's pinned comment, and you should know exactly what that means. The ad comes on YouTube. It's fine. Ignore the ad. Head down there. Give me your one-word reaction to the Hooker Parsons podcast drama. My one word is classic, because isn't this just kind of par for the course with how things go with the Dallas Cowboys? There's always something going on. It's never just a normal off-season, preseason, regular season, whatever, for the Dallas Cowboys. There's always something going on, and sometimes I think Jerry just loves it. I'll say this. I don't think anything Malik Hooker said was wrong. I think there's a lot of things he was dead on nails correct about. And it has been a common and valid criticism, not just at times for me, but from many of you in the comments, from national media, fans, whatever. Shoot, podcast Parsons flows off the tongue pretty well, right? Kind of like Scam Newton, which I thought was kind of mean, but it sounds funny. And Micah has not yet beaten the podcast Parsons allegations, right? I don't think Malik Hooker's own comments, his own teammates, are going to make that noise die down. I will say this, though. That is not the right way to go about it. I think Malik Hooker's right to say it. I think his opinion is correct. I don't want him airing it out on a national podcast. And I don't think Micah Parsons like that either. This was a since-deleted tweet from Micah that said, just wish you said this to me, but instead on some podcast. And you got my number, family, adding Malik Hooker, and you're my locker mate. You could have said this any day. And you do realize I shoot the podcast on our off day. And why are we talking about everyone's preparation and focus? Now, look, Micah's right about not making it public. It's also, I think, very ironic to raise issues with Micah Parsons' podcast while you are on a podcast, right? Kind of seems a little bit hypocritical. Also, it is ironic and hypocritical for Micah to say, hey, you should not say that's about me publicly, by saying it publicly. Like, we're kind of doing the same mistake twice, right? I don't like that being said publicly. I'm going to say publicly. You got his number. If you don't like that it's being said publicly and you want it to be said man-to-man, tell him that man-to-man. This is the type of thing that just needs to be handled in person, behind the scenes, so that none of us see it. We never get a whiff of it being a concern. It's not handled over social media, and it doesn't become a national storyline for First Take and Undisputed, blah, blah, blah. It just causes issues. So does this type of stuff, this public airing of the grievances, I'll call it, does it worry or bother you? I do want honest opinions here. Why for yes and for no? Does this concern you at all? Go vote for me in the comment section of today's show. Now, Malik Hooker eventually did respond also on a different social media platform on Instagram. It says, and I'm going to speak on this once, adding Micah Parsons. He's little bro, meaning it's his little bro. No podcast. His podcast isn't hurting anything. Don't fall for bait. He knows what I mean, and he knows me. See y'all in Oxnard. So maybe in the end, this will all just be water under the bridge, kumbaya, no issues whatsoever, no problems, nothing to really be concerned about. But I do think this is another possible distraction, right? And it's one of the things you can point back to. I am concerned about this year that I think this can all go belly up, to use a nicer variation of that phrase, if everyone is basically on a one-year deal. There's a handful of guys that aren't, in whether it's in reality with the way their contracts are set up, or it's actually a physical one-year deal. So practicality, not actuality. There's another example of, you know what? The writing was on the wall when everything turned from me instead of we. That is my biggest concern with this Cowboys team, because that's what they set up contract-wise for everybody in the organization. Also worth mentioning, Parsons also tried to make that about everybody, right? He kind of defended himself in the tweet, too. Like, I do it on our off days. Also, what about everybody else? I kind of don't like that. I think it's another example of it's never Micah's fault, right? Which, hey, he produces a great level. I am okay dealing with that if that's the downside you got to deal with. It's the production outweighs the whatever flag for the word BS you have to deal with there. But, come on, guys, just keep it in-house. Now, if you want more Cowboys coverage, a second video coming up today, by the way, hit that sub button. It's over at youtube.com/CowboysTV. What Malik Hooker also did, and I would argue this might be a bigger issue within the locker room, potentially. We'll see if it actually ends up playing out that way. Who knows? It might just be ignored because, it's June. The contract rankings. Malik Hooker was part of the coverage. Was like, who would you pay first? He put CeeDee Lamb number one, saying, he's so important to our team. He's so good, so young. Lamb's number one. He said you could pick Dak or Zach Martin second. Like, both those guys are super impactful. They're huge leaders for us. And then he put Micah fourth. Said Micah should be paid last. Here's what Malik said. Micah still has a lot to prove. He has done a great job in his first couple of years in the league. Don't get me wrong. He's a fantastic player, but I feel like Micah still has a surface that he doesn't even know that he can scratch as far as what he's doing. I would say Micah's last just for that reason. I think the contract rankings are mostly fine. I think if you were to ask people, that's probably the order most of them would put it in. I think putting Zach Martin on there is interesting. I don't know if Malik Hooker is alluding to something that we don't know, that Martin wants another extension, or if he's just not aware that Martin is considering retirement. Different sides of the ball, different position groups after all. But again, I don't think this is a good look for Malik Hooker. I think he's right that Micah does have another level to scratch, and maybe that's what Hooker's really referring to, that he wants Micah to fully realize his potential. But I don't think it's a good look for players like, this guy deserves to be paid the most, and this guy deserves to be paid the least. It's not something players typically do because it doesn't really help anybody. Then it becomes Malik Hooker wants to make Micah Parsons paid last. That's why most players go like, I don't pocket watch. I'm not paying attention. They get all the money they deserve. It's a four-way tie for first. Everyone should get paid. Doesn't help people. In the end, back to the whole conversation between Micah and Malik Hooker, I think both are right and both are wrong. I think they had some valid airing of the grievances. You just don't do it publicly. Don't do it on a podcast. Text it, meet in person in Oxnard. Say, hey man, the podcast, don't make it a priority. That's fine. Don't say that on a podcast. It makes it look like there's not good leadership. I don't think, Micah, my issue with why he wasn't present at OTAs and stuff, he said he wants to be a better leader, change the culture. This is not culture changing. This is more of the same classic country club Cowboys BS where you're subtweeting each other, right? Like, come on. Just put it to the side and focus on winning games and don't let it become a public conversation.